Joe Mason rubbed his tired eyes and looked at the clock on the wall. It was 2:18 a.m. The night shift at the NASA Deep Space Listening Post in Arizona was always quiet, but tonight felt especially still. Joe took a sip of his cold coffee and turned, back to his monitors. At 35 years old and only 5'6", Joe was used to being underestimated. He had worked at NASA for 7 years as a communications specialist. His small frame and quiet manner made him easy to overlook at office parties, but his mind was sharp and his ears were sharper. Joe leaned closer to his screen. There it was again, a pattern in the background noise. For 3 nights, he had noticed it, a regular pulse coming from a point near Alpha Centauri, not random, not natural. Joe felt a chill run down his spine. Computer, isolate signal pattern KJM 2023 and amplify, Joe said, his voice barely above a whisper. The computer hummed. The pattern appeared on his screen, clear and unmistakable. 6 pulses, a pause, 8 pulses, a pause, 12 pulses. Then, it repeated over and over, too perfect to be natural. Joe's hands shook as he picked up the phone. "Sir, this is Mason at Station 12. I need to speak with Director Collins immediately." 48 hours later, Joe stood in a crowded conference room at NASA headquarters in Washington. Scientists, military officers, and government officials filled the room. Joe felt small among them, but he stood tall as he explained his discovery. The signal pattern repeats every 42 seconds. It contains mathematical sequences that cannot happen in nature. This is not a pulsar or a quasar. This is a message. Joe's voice was firm despite his dry mouth. Director Collins nodded. "And you're certain of this, Mason?" "Yes, sir." 100% certain it's artificial. Someone sent it. The room went silent. Joe could hear the air conditioning humming above them. 3 days later, the signal changed. It began broadcasting prime numbers, then simple images. A circle, a triangle, a humanoid figure. The message was clear. Whoever sent it wanted Earth to know they were coming. 1 week after Joe's discovery had happened, a massive ship appeared in Earth's orbit. It was enormous, nearly 2 miles long and shaped like a smooth silver teardrop. Smaller vessels detached from it and took positions around the planet. The world held its breath. Military forces went on high alert. Religious leaders called for calm. Regular people stocked up on food and water, afraid of what might come next. Then, a message arrived on every computer, television, and radio on Earth. "We come in peace. We represent the Galactic Assembly. We wish to establish diplomatic relations with Earth." The United Nations called an emergency session. They needed to form a response team, people who would meet with the aliens and speak for all of humanity. Joe was surprised when his secure phone rang. "Mr. Mason, this is Secretary General Williams. Your name has been put forward as part of our first contact team. Your discovery of the signal and your understanding of their communication methods make you valuable to this mission." Joe felt his heart race. "Me, sir? I'm just a communications specialist. You're the person who heard them first, Mason. That matters. Will you accept?" 2 days later, Joe found himself in a sleek shuttle rising from Earth toward the massive alien ship. With him were 4 other humans. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a xenobiologist, General Alan Clark, a military representative, Dr. Sam Patel, a linguist, and Maria Bell, a senior diplomat. As the shuttle docked with the alien vessel, Joe looked out the small window. The ship's interior was massive, with curved walls that seemed to glow from within. "We're making history," Dr. Rodriguez whispered. Beside him, the airlock door slid open. Joe was the last one through, following his taller colleagues. What he saw made him freeze in place. The room was filled with aliens, dozens of them, all different shapes, colors, and sizes. But all of them were huge. The smallest stood at least 7 feet tall. Some reached nearly 12 feet. Joe felt like a child among giants. Then something strange happened. As Joe entered the room, several aliens stepped back. Others touched devices on their wrists. A few made sounds that their translators didn't catch. Joe was the smallest being in the room by far. But somehow, for reasons he couldn't understand, many of the aliens seemed cautious, even afraid of him. Image description: a small human man in a NASA uniform standing in a massive alien spacecraft chamber. He is surrounded by various tall alien species, all at least 7 to 12 feet tall with diverse body shapes and features. Despite being the smallest in the room, the aliens are showing body language indicating fear and caution toward him. The scene has cool blue and silver lighting with advanced technology visible on the walls. Joe stood frozen as the giant aliens stared at him. He felt like a mouse in a room full of lions. One alien stepped forward. It had blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. Its forearms were long and thin, and it stood at least 9 feet tall. "Welcome, humans of Earth," the alien said. Its voice came through a small device on its chest. "I am Zeltor, Chief Ambassador of the Galactic Assembly." Maria Bell, the human diplomat, stepped forward. "Thank you for your invitation, Ambassador. We are honored to represent Earth." Joe noticed that Zeltor's large eyes kept darting toward him, even though Maria was speaking. Other aliens were doing the same. Joe checked his uniform, wondering if something was wrong with it. Zeltor led them into a large room. A round table sat in the center, but it was too tall for the humans. Quickly, smaller chairs and platforms were brought in so they could reach the table. Joe felt like a child at the adults' table. "The assembly consists of 247 spacefaring species," Zeltor explained. "We have existed for over 10,000 of your Earth years." As the ambassador spoke, Joe noticed a tall green alien with 3 eyes watching him closely. When Joe looked back, the alien quickly turned away. General Clark asked about the assembly's military power. Dr. Rodriguez asked about alien biology. Dr. Patel studied the translation technology. Maria asked about trade and diplomacy. Joe listened carefully but also watched the aliens. They acted strangely around the humans, especially him. When he moved his hand to take notes, 2 aliens on the other side of the table flinched. After 3 hours of talks, the humans were shown to their quarters. They had a large area with 5 separate rooms and a common meeting space. The doors were huge, designed for beings much larger than humans. "Did anyone else notice how they keep watching us?" Joe asked when they were alone. Dr. Rodriguez nodded, like we might explode at any moment. "It's a common diplomatic tactic," Maria said. "They want us off balance." General Clark disagreed. "No, this is something else. They're afraid, not trying to intimidate." Later that night, Joe couldn't sleep. He decided to explore their area of the ship. He carried a small device that measured energy and radiation levels, standard safety gear for space missions. The corridors were massive, with high ceilings and wide walkways. Joe felt tiny as he walked. He passed a few aliens who immediately moved to the other side of the corridor when they saw him. As Joe turned a corner, he nearly bumped into a tall, thin alien with gray skin. The alien gasped and stepped back quickly. "I'm sorry," Joe said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. "I didn't see you." The alien stared at him. "You are the one called Joe Mason?" "Yes, that's me." "The one who first heard our signal?" Joe nodded. "I was working the night shift. It was just luck." The alien made a sound like bells tinkling. "There is no such thing as luck with your kind." Before Joe could ask what that meant, his measuring device began to beep. The display showed unusual energy readings coming from nearby. "What is that?" the alien asked, now looking alarmed. "Just a standard scanner. It's picking up some kind of energy." The alien's 3-fingered hand moved to a device on its belt. "You should not be able to detect that." Joe looked at his scanner again. "It's nothing dangerous, just unusual." "You should return to your quarters, human." The alien's voice was now cold. Joe started to leave, but then stopped. "Can I ask you something? Why is everyone so nervous around us? We're half your size. We have no weapons." The alien was quiet for a moment. Then it leaned down closer to Joe. "It is not what you are that frightens us. It is what you might become." With that, the alien hurried away, leaving Joe confused in the massive corridor. When Joe returned to the human quarters, he found Kate Winters, an assistant to Dr. Rodriguez, waiting up. Kate was new to the team, having joined just before launch. She was smart and curious, and one of the few people who treated Joe normally. "You couldn't sleep either?" she asked. Joe showed her his scanner. "Look at these readings I found, and the aliens. They're scared of us for some reason." Kate studied the scanner. "We need to find out why. Tomorrow, let's do some exploring together." Joe nodded, feeling less alone. Something strange was happening on this ship, and he was determined to find out what it was. Image description: a small human man in a dark corridor of an alien spacecraft, holding a glowing scanner device. He's looking up at a tall, thin gray alien with 3 fingers who appears nervous and is reaching for a device on its belt. The corridor has high ceilings with strange glowing symbols along the walls, emphasizing the size difference between them. The human looks curious while the alien appears apprehensive, with a subtle blue energy field visible on the scanner's display. The next day, Joe and Kate slipped away from the main diplomatic meetings. The rest of the human team was busy with official tours and talks. No one noticed when Joe and Kate took a different turn down a side corridor. "My scanner picked up the strongest energy readings from this direction," Joe whispered. Kate nodded. She carried a small tablet that mapped their route so they wouldn't get lost. The ship was enormous, with countless hallways that all looked the same to human eyes. "Look at these markings," Kate said, pointing to symbols on the wall. "They're different from the ones in our section." Joe ran his hand over the strange symbols. They seemed to glow faintly under his touch. His scanner beeped, showing higher energy readings. "We're getting closer to something," Joe said. They turned a corner and found a door. Unlike the other doors on the ship, this one was smaller, almost human-sized. Strange symbols covered its surface. "Can you read any of this?" Joe asked. Kate shook her head. "Dr. Patel is the linguist, not me, but look. This symbol appears on all the restricted areas we've seen." Joe's scanner was now beeping steadily. "Whatever is causing those energy readings is behind this door." Kate touched the door's surface. Nothing happened. Joe reached out and touched it too. The moment his fingers made contact, the symbols began to glow brighter. A soft humming sound filled the air and the door slid open. "How did you do that?" Kate asked, eyes wide. "I don't know," Joe answered honestly. "It just opened." They stepped into a dark room. As they entered, lights activated automatically, revealing what looked like an alien library. The walls were covered with screens showing star maps and strange text. In the center of the room stood a column of swirling light. "What is this place?" Kate whispered. Joe approached the column of light cautiously. His scanner was now beeping rapidly. As he got closer, images began to appear in the light. Planets, stars, and what looked like DNA strands. "I think it's some kind of database," Joe said. Kate was examining one of the wall screens. "Joe, come look at this." The screen showed images of different alien species with text beneath each one. Kate tapped on the screen and the images changed, showing what appeared to be historical records. "I wish we could read this," she said. As if in response to her words, the text on the screen changed, transforming into English. "Welcome, Shaper Descendant," a soft voice said from somewhere in the room. Joe and Kate jumped in surprise. "What's a Shaper?" Joe asked the empty air. The column of light in the center of the room changed, showing the image of a being that looked almost human, but taller, with slightly different proportions. "The Shapers were the first," the voice explained. "They shaped stars and planets. They walked between worlds. They touched the void and bent it to their will." More images appeared, beings that looked similar to humans, performing what seemed like impossible feats, moving objects without touching them, creating energy from nothing, healing wounds with a touch. "The Shapers ruled the galaxy peacefully for 10,000 years, the voice continued, "until the Great Betrayal." The images changed, showing war and destruction. The Shapers were hunted to extinction by those who feared their power. But not all were found. Some hid. Some changed their form. Some forgot what they were. A new image appeared. A map of Earth. The last Shapers fled to a distant world, a blue world. They mixed with the native species there. Their powers became dormant, but their genes remained. Joe felt a chill run down his spine. Earth, he whispered. They went to Earth. Human DNA contains dormant shaper genes, the voice confirmed. After 50,000 years, the potential awakens again. Kate looked at Joe with wide eyes. That's why they're afraid of us. We're descendants of these shapers. Joe was about to reply when alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. The door to the library slid open and 3 large security aliens rushed in, weapons drawn. Unauthorized access, one shouted. Step away from the archives. Joe raised his hands to show he wasn't a threat. As he did, his scanner fell to the floor with a crash. The device broke, releasing a small burst of energy. The energy wave hit the column of light, causing it to flare brightly. The security aliens immediately backed away, weapons now pointed directly at Joe. He's activating, one of them shouted, in fear. Containment protocol now. Joe stared in confusion as the light from the column seemed to flow toward him, swirling around his hands. He felt a strange tingling sensation throughout his body. The security aliens were now pressed against the wall as far from Joe as possible. Their weapons shook in their hands. Despite being 3 times Joe's size, they looked terrified. What's happening to me? Joe asked, his voice shaking as the light continued to swirl around him. Image description. A small human man standing in an alien archive room with swirling light energy flowing from a central column toward his outstretched hands. The light creates glowing blue-white patterns around his fingers. 3 large armored alien security guards are pressed against the wall, weapons drawn but trembling, their faces showing fear. Behind the human is a wall of illuminated screens showing DNA strands and what appear to be ancient humanoid figures. A female human looks on with amazement. The room has a mystical technological atmosphere with star maps and alien symbols glowing in the background. Joe stared at his hands as the light swirled around them. He wasn't in pain, but he felt strange, like electricity was running through his veins. Put your weapons down, came a firm voice from the doorway. You will not harm the humans. Linda Hayes, the senior human diplomat who had joined their mission at the last minute, stood in the entrance. Behind her was a tall, ancient-looking alien with skin like tree bark and 6 eyes that blinked in sequence. The security guards lowered their weapons but still looked terrified. Ambassador Hayes, one of the guards said. The human activated shaper energy. Linda walked calmly into the room. I know, and no one will be punished for it. This was bound to happen sooner or later. Joe looked at Linda in confusion. You know about the shapers? About all of this? Linda nodded. A few of us do. Earth's governments have suspected for decades that we might not be entirely Earthborn. The light around Joe's hand slowly faded. He felt tired suddenly, like he had run a long race. This is Zexatral, Linda said, pointing to the ancient alien beside her. He's one of the oldest members of the Galactic Assembly and has agreed to help us. To help you, Joe. Zexatral stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. You have awakened much sooner than expected, young one. I don't understand what's happening to me, Joe said. You are remembering what your ancestors were, Zexatral explained. His voice was deep and raspy. Humans carry the dormant genes of the shapers. Most never activate these genes, but some like you have the potential. Kate moved to Joe's side. What exactly could the shapers do? What can Joe do? The shapers could manipulate quantum probability fields, Zexatral said. In simple terms, they could change the likelihood of events, make the unlikely happen, prevent the likely from occurring. Joe shook his head. That sounds like magic. To primitive cultures, advanced science often does, Zexatral replied. Your species has a saying, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. The shapers didn't use technology. They used their minds. The room was silent for a moment. Then Linda spoke again. Joe, you're not the only human with active shaper genes. There are others on Earth. Very few, but they exist. That's part of why the Galactic Assembly made contact. Now, they've been watching us for centuries, and lately more humans have been showing signs of these abilities. Joe looked at his hands again. They seemed normal now, but he could still feel something different inside him. How do I control it? He asked. That is why I am here, Zextral said. To teach you. The Assembly fears what humans might become if they develop these powers without guidance. One of the security guards spoke up. The Vorkath Dominion is all ready, calling for Earth's quarantine. They say humans are too dangerous. Linda's face hardened, which is exactly why Joe needs to learn control quickly. The Dominion has representatives arriving tomorrow. Zextral gestured for Joe to follow him. We will begin now. Time is short. They left the archive room and went to a large empty chamber elsewhere on the ship. The walls were made of a strange material that seemed to absorb light. This is a training room, Zextral explained. The walls dampen energy fluctuations. You can practice safely here. Joe stood in the center of the room, feeling small and lost. What am I supposed to do? Close your eyes, Zextral instructed. Feel the energy inside you. The Shapers called it the void current. It flows through all things, but most beings cannot sense it. Joe closed his eyes. At first he felt nothing. Then gradually he became aware of a subtle humming energy flowing through his body. I feel something, he whispered. Good. Now extend your awareness. Feel the objects around you. Joe tried to do as instructed. Suddenly he could sense everything in the room. The walls, the floor, even the small observation device in the corner. He could feel the atoms moving, the probabilities of their movements. Try to influence something small, Zextral said. He placed a coin on the floor. Change its position without touching it. Joe focused on the coin. He could feel its atoms, its weight, the probability of it remaining still versus moving. He pushed at those probabilities, making movement more likely than SDA. Joe trained through the night with Zextral. By morning, he could move objects across the room, change the temperature of water, and even repair a broken glass by changing the probability of it being whole rather than broken. You learn quickly, Zextral said. The Shaper blood runs strong in you. Joe sat on the floor, exhausted. What happens now? Now we face the Vorkath, Linda said as she entered the training room. Their delegation has arrived early. They're demanding an emergency session of the Assembly Council. Joe stood up, trying to hide how tired he felt. What do they want? Linda's face was grim. They want Earth quarantined, no contact with other worlds, no travel beyond our solar system. Forever. Kate rushed into the room, her face flushed with excitement. I've been researching the archives. The Vorkath were the main species that turned against the Shapers. They led the rebellion 50,000 years ago. Zextral nodded slowly. The Vorkath fear what they cannot control, and they could never control the Shapers. We need to get to the council chamber, Linda said urgently. The Vorkath are already making their case. They hurried through the massive corridors of the ship. Joe noticed that aliens moved even farther away from him now. News of what happened in the archives had spread quickly. The council chamber was enormous, with seats for hundreds of alien representatives. Most were already filled. At the center was a raised platform where the current speaker stood, a massive, red-skinned alien with 4 arms and a head that looked too small for its body. This is Grathfor, High Commander of the Vorkath Dominion, Linda whispered to Joe. And so it is clear, Grathfor was saying, his voice booming through the chamber, that humans must be contained. They carry the cursed genes of the Shapers. Already one has shown active abilities. How long before they all awaken? How long before they try to rule us all again? Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some aliens seemed afraid. Others looked angry. Zeltor, the blue-skinned ambassador they had met on the first day, stood up. The Galactic Assembly does not condemn entire species based on their genetics. Humans have shown no hostile intent. Yet, Grathfor shouted, they have shown no hostile intent yet. The Shapers were peaceful too until they weren't, Linda whispered. To Joe, this isn't going well. The Vorkath have many allies in the Assembly. Zextral stepped forward. I request permission to address the council. The chamber grew quiet. Zextral was clearly respected by all. I have worked with the human Joe Mason, Zextral said. His abilities are indeed real, but I have seen no evidence of malice or desire for power. Grathvor laughed harshly. Of course not. He is but one small human. But what about when there are thousands with these powers? Millions. The Shapers nearly destroyed our ancestors. That is the Vorkath version of history, Zextral replied, calmly. Not all remember it that way. Grathvor's small eyes narrowed. Are you calling me a liar, old one? I am suggesting that history is written by the victors, Zextral said. The chamber erupted in shouts and arguments. Joe felt overwhelmed by the noise and tension. Then Grathvor pointed directly at Joe. Let the human speak. Let him tell us why we should trust his kind. All eyes turned to Joe. He felt tiny among these giant aliens, but he stepped forward anyway. I don't know much about your history, Joe said honestly. I only learned yesterday that humans might be related to the Shapers. I don't know what happened thousands of years ago. Joe took a deep breath and continued. But I do know that humans don't want war. We want to learn. We want to grow. We want to be part of this assembly as equals. Grathvor snorted. Pretty words. But words mean nothing. I demand the ancient right of challenge. The chamber went silent. What's the right of challenge? Joe whispered to Linda. Her face had gone pale. It's an old assembly custom, rarely used nowadays. A dispute between species can be settled by a formal contest between champions. I name Joe Mason as the human champion, Grathvor declared loudly. And I will represent the Vorkath. If he wins, Earth joins the assembly. If I win, Earth is quarantined forever. That's not fair, Kate protested. Joe just discovered his abilities yesterday, but Grathvor was already speaking to the council again. The human shows Shaper abilities. Let him prove they can be used responsibly. Or let him fail and prove our point. Zeltor looked troubled. The human must accept the challenge willingly. Those are the ancient laws. All eyes turned to Joe again. Linda leaned close to him. You don't have to do this. We can find another way. But Joe knew there was no other way. The Vorkath had planned this all along. He had to accept. I accept the challenge, Joe said, his voice stronger than he felt. Image description. A massive, circular alien council chamber with tiered seating, filled with hundreds of diverse alien species. In the center is a small human man, facing off against a towering red-skinned alien with 4 arms and a disproportionately small head. The human looks determined despite being dwarfed by his opponent. Blue energy subtly glows around the human's hands. The chamber has dramatic lighting with spotlights on both figures, creating long shadows. The alien representatives are showing various reactions, some fearful, some curious, some hostile. Ancient-looking symbols are carved into the walls and floor of the chamber, and holographic displays float in the air above the central platform. The council chamber emptied quickly. The challenge was set for the next day, giving Joe only hours to prepare. As he left with Linda, Kate, and Zextral, Joe noticed Grathvor watching him with a smug smile. He thinks he's already won, Joe said. The Vorkath are warriors, Zextral explained. Grathvor is their greatest champion. He has won 17 challenges in his lifetime. Joe felt his stomach twist with worry. And how many have I won? 0. Linda put her hand on Joe's shoulder. You don't have to outfight him. The challenge isn't always combat. Each side proposes a test and the council chooses one. Kate looked thoughtful. We need to learn more about the Vorkath, about the real history between them and the Shapers. There might be something we can use. I know someone who might help, Zextral said. But it will be dangerous. The Vorkath have spies everywhere on this ship. Late that night, the 4 of them snuck through quiet corridors to a lower level of the ship. This area seemed older, with worn walls and dimmer lights. Zextral led them to a small door that Joe would have easily missed. Inside was a cramped room where a small alien sat surrounded by plants. The alien had green, leaf-like skin and large, wise eyes. This is Elder Mira of the Eldurians, Zextral said. Her people were allies of the Shapers before the Great War. Mira studied Joe with interest. So the blood awakens again, after all these cycles. We need to know the truth about the Shapers and the Vorkath, Kate said. The real history, not what the Vorkath tell everyone. Mira nodded slowly. The truth has been my burden for over 300 years. I will share it with you now. She touched a plant beside her. It glowed and projected images into the air, beautiful worlds, peaceful beings that looked somewhat like humans. The Shapers were not conquerors, Mira said. They were guardians. Their gift, your gift, was meant to heal worlds, not destroy them. The images changed, showing Shapers using their powers to restore dying planets, to heal sick beings of many species. The Vorkath were once a dying race, Mira continued. Their world was poisoned by their own wars. The Shapers saved them, healed their planet. In return, the Vorkath promised alliance. Joe watched as the images showed Vorkath and Shapers working together. But the Vorkath leaders grew jealous of Shaper abilities, Mira said. They wanted the power for themselves. When they could not take it by force, they turned to deception. The images now showed betrayal, Vorkath attacking Shapers when they weren't expecting it. They rewrote history after the Shapers were gone, Mira finished sadly. Painted them as tyrants and themselves as liberators. Few remember the truth now. Joe sat quietly, taking in this new information. How does this help with the challenge? The challenge, Mira said, is about showing the Assembly who you truly are. The Vorkath expect you to fight as they would, with anger and force. Instead, you must show them what a Shaper truly was. A healer, Joe whispered. Not a destroyer. Yes, Mira said. And there is something else you should know. The Vorkath do not plan to fight fairly. They fear what your kind might become. They will try to kill you during the challenge. Linda looked alarmed. We should withdraw. This is too dangerous. Joe shook his head. No. If I back out now, Earth will be quarantined. We'll never join the Assembly. Then you must prepare, Zextral said. I will train you through the night. As they left Mira's quarters, Kate pulled Joe aside. I have an idea. The Vorkath ship. If we could get aboard, we might find evidence of their plans. That's too risky, Linda said, overhearing. Joe thought for a moment. Actually, it might be our best chance. They won't expect us to be that bold. Once Linda and Zextral had gone ahead, Joe and Kate slipped away. Using the skills Joe had learned from Zextral, they were able to avoid the ship's security systems. They found a small maintenance craft and made their way to the Vorkath vessel. If we're caught, this could start a war, Kate whispered as they approached the massive red-hulled ship. Then we won't get caught, Joe said, focusing his mind on changing the probability of their success. As they neared the ship, Joe felt his abilities reaching out. Joe and Kate moved deeper into the Vorkath ship. The corridors were wide but felt cramped because of the sharp angles and red lighting. Everything about the ship seemed designed to feel threatening. The command center should be this way, Kate whispered, checking a small device she had programmed to detect power sources. They turned a corner and froze. Two Vorkath guards stood outside a large door. The aliens were huge, with heavy armor and weapons that glowed with strange energy. Now what? Kate whispered. Joe closed his eyes for a moment, focusing on his training. I'm going to try something. Stay close to me. He concentrated on the probability field around them, making it more likely that the guards would not notice them. It was like pulling a thin veil over their presence. Walk very slowly, Joe said quietly. Don't make sudden movements. They began to walk forward, directly past the guards. Joe felt sweat running down his back as he focused. The guards seemed to look right through them, their eyes never quite focusing on the humans. Once past the guards, they slipped into a side room, some kind of data storage chamber. Screens covered the walls, showing star maps and battle plans. Look. At this, Kate said, pointing to one screen that showed Earth with military targets marked. Joe felt cold anger rising inside him. They've been planning to attack Earth all along. The challenge is just for show. Kate worked quickly, copying data from the Vorkath computers to her device. We need proof to show the council. Suddenly, they heard voices outside. Joe grabbed Kate's arm and pulled her behind a large storage unit just as the door opened. Grath Vor entered with another Vorkath officer. They were speaking in their own language, but Joe's translator picked up their words. "The weapon is ready?" Grath Vor asked. "Yes, Commander. It will release a targeted energy pulse during the challenge. It will look like the human lost control of his powers. No one will suspect us." Grath Vor laughed. "The Council will have no choice but to quarantine Earth. Then we begin the purification." "Are you sure the human even has real shaper abilities?" the officer asked. "He seems weak." "Our sensors confirm it. His genetic structure is activating rapidly. If left unchecked, he could become as powerful as the ancient ones. We cannot allow that." The two Vorkath left the room, still talking about their plans. Joe and Kate looked at each other in shock. "They're going to kill you and make it look like an accident," Kate whispered. "And then attack Earth," Joe added grimly. "We need to get back to the assembly ship." They made their way out of the Vorkath vessel, Joe using his abilities to keep them hidden. By the time they returned to their quarters, it was almost morning. Linda and Zextral were waiting for them, looking worried. "Where have you been?" Linda demanded. "The challenge starts in 2 hours." Joe quickly explained what they had discovered. He showed them the data Kate had copied from the Vorkath computers. "This changes everything," Linda said. "We need to show this to the Council immediately." Zextral shook his head slowly. "They will not postpone the challenge. It is an ancient tradition, but we can prepare Joe for what is to come." For the next hour, Zextral worked with Joe, teaching him how to defend himself against energy weapons. Joe learned to create a probability field that could absorb or deflect attacks. When it was time, they made their way to the challenge arena. It was an enormous circular room with seating for thousands of aliens. All the major species of the Galactic assembly were present, watching with curious eyes. Joe entered the arena from one side. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a t-shirt from Earth. Across from him, Grath Vor entered wearing elaborate battle armor that made him look even larger. Zeltor stood in the center of the arena. The challenge has been set by the Council. Each champion will demonstrate their abilities by dealing with unstable quanton crystals. These crystals are highly reactive and dangerous. The champion who best stabilizes them will be declared the winner. 2 pedestals rose from the floor, each holding a cluster of glowing blue crystals that pulsed with unstable energy. "Let the challenge begin," Zeltor announced, then quickly moved away from the crystals. Grath Vor immediately went to work, using tools from his armor to surround his crystals with a containment field. It was impressive technology, and the crystals began to stabilize. Joe approached his crystals more slowly. He could feel the unstable energy within them, wild, chaotic probability states in flux. This was exactly what his shaper abilities were meant to effect. He placed his hands near the crystals, not touching them, but feeling their energy. Then he closed his eyes and began to work. Joe didn't try to contain the crystals as Grath Vor was doing. Instead, he reached into them with his mind, finding the chaotic probability fields and gently smoothing them, bringing order to the quantum chaos. The crystals began to glow with a steady, soft light. The dangerous pulses faded away. Image description: a large circular arena with tiered seating filled with thousands of diverse alien spectators. In the center are 2 pedestals with glowing blue crystals. On one side stands a small human man, with his hands extended over his crystals, which emit a steady, harmonious blue light. Beautiful patterns of energy flow from his hands into the crystals. On the opposite side, a large red 4-armed alien in elaborate battle armor is using technological devices to contain his crystals, which still pulse erratically. The human's expression is calm and focused, while the alien looks increasingly concerned. In the background, official-looking aliens observe from a raised platform. The lighting creates dramatic shadows across the arena floor, which is marked with ceremonial patterns. A subtle hidden device can be seen on the alien's armor, pointing toward the human. The crowd watched in silence as Joe worked with the crystals. His face was calm, but inside he was alert, waiting for Grathvor's attack. He knew it would come soon. From the corner of his eye, Joe saw Grathvor adjust something on his armor. A small device emerged, pointing at Joe. This was it. The weapon. They had planned to use. Joe didn't react visibly. He continued working with the crystals, but now he also extended his awareness outward, feeling the probability field around him, ready to change it when needed. Grathvor pressed a button on his armor. A nearly invisible beam of energy shot toward Joe. If it hit him, it would disrupt his nervous system and make it look like his powers had backfired. At the last second, Joe shifted the probability field. The beam, which should have hit him directly, curved away and hit the floor instead. The energy dissipated harmlessly. Grathvor looked shocked. He fired again, more openly this time. Again, Joe redirected the energy away from himself. The Vorkath champion is violating the rules of challenge, Zeltor announced loudly. This is forbidden. But Grathvor was desperate now. He abandoned his crystals and charged directly at Joe, pulling out a weapon that glowed with deadly energy. You will not stop our plans, human, he roared. Joe stood his ground. As Grathvor swung his weapon, Joe created a probability field where the weapon was more likely to pass through empty air than hit him. The massive alien's attack missed by inches. I don't want to fight you, Joe said calmly. That's not what these abilities are for. Grathvor attacked again and again, but could not land a blow. Joe dodged without seeming to move, the probability fields shifting around him. Finally, Grathvor stopped, breathing heavily. What are you? He demanded. I'm human, Joe answered simply. And I'm offering peace, just as the Shapers once offered to your ancestors. Joe turned to address the entire assembly. The Vorkath have lied to you. The Shapers were not conquerors. They were healers who saved worlds, including the Vorkath homeworld. He held up Kate's device, which projected the evidence they had found on the Vorkath ship. And now they plan to attack Earth, to destroy us before we can take our place among you. The assembly erupted in shocked conversations. Grathvor roared in rage and lunged at Joe one last time. This time Joe didn't dodge. Instead, he created a probability field that made it extremely likely that Grathvor's own armor would malfunction. With a shower of sparks, the Vorkath's battlesuit froze in place, leaving him immobilized. I could hurt you, Joe said quietly. But that's not what these powers are meant for. He placed his hands on Grathvor's armor and shifted the probabilities again. The damaged systems repaired themselves, but remained in standby mode. Grathvor could move again, but his weapons were disabled. The council members conferred quickly. Then Zeltor stepped forward. The challenge is complete. The human champion has won both by stabilizing the crystals and by showing mercy to an opponent who showed none. Joe felt relief wash over him. He looked up at the thousands of alien faces watching him. He didn't see fear anymore, at least, not only fear. He saw interest, curiosity, and even respect. 3 days later, the human delegation gathered in the council chamber again. This time, Joe stood proudly with Linda, Kate, and the others as Zeltor made the announcement. Earth is granted provisional membership in the Galactic Assembly, Zeltor declared. And we recognize the right of humans to develop their natural abilities with proper guidance. The Vorkath delegation had been reduced in status, their military confined to their own territory. They glared at Joe from across the chamber, but could do nothing. As they left the chamber, Linda smiled at Joe. This is just the beginning. We'll need to establish training centers on Earth for others with ability.